Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Book 'em Nook Show. My name is Kyle Colley, and this is another episode of the Creator Talk Podcast, a podcast for bookish content creators to talk about all things books. Today, we have a special guest. And if you don't mind me doing this, Traci, I'd love to do my best Club Shannon Sharp impression. So
Okay.
let me try this and see how it works. She is a reader. She is a book enthusiast. She is a conversationalist, a cook, a blogger, a content creator, a podcaster, a reviewer, a globetrotter with her Live in the Stacks. She is a mom, a wife, an all-out superstar, and she's also one of your readers' favorite readers. She is the host of The Stacks, Traci Thomas. How are you doing today?
This
Did I
is
miss
so
anything?
nice. That was such a good, I mean, you did miss things, but only the unflattering things. So I'll keep the list you had. We won't add anything.
Sure thing.
Thank you.
We'll make sure to get into all that. Well, one of my favorite things is kind of like when podcasters get a chance to be the interviewee. So I'm so glad to have you on this podcast. And today we're going to be talking about all things books from like 2023 all the way to 2024. I know you did this with your on your podcast, The Stacks with MJ and Adam, but I would love to spice it up a little bit, do some superlatives for this year.
Okay. That sounds great.
Perfect.
Let me pull up. I got to pull up my reading tracker.
Go ahead.
Make sure I have everything that I read. We're going to start with 2023, right?
Let's start 2023.
Okay, let me pull up my tracker so I have everything I read in 2023. Tracker. I should have had this set up. I built this reading tracker for myself in like 2019. So I could track everything that I read. And then over the years, I've like updated it and enhanced it. And then 2 years ago, I had 2 members of the Stacks Pack, which is my like Patreon community who are really into spreadsheets, help me turn it into one spreadsheet for all of my reading instead of like these different spreadsheets for each year. And it is like my favorite thing in the world. I track every single thing I read, and I can tell you like how many memoirs I've read. Like it's all since 2016. So I need it because otherwise I forget things. Sorry, that was a long intro.
I enjoy it. And if you're ready, I would love to hear what your best page turner of 2023 is.
I think that's probably Chain Gang All Stars. I thought that was like such a page turner. I really loved it. Didn't even have to check the tracker for that one. Just like one of those books where you have to know what's going to happen. Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah, who is just so creative, and he does such a great job with like world building without doing the thing where it's like world building, like he creates this world for you with these little moments or these little sentences, and it kind of helps you orient yourself. And then there's like so much plot in the book and so much going on, and there's this like romance. It's just couldn't get enough.
I love to hear. The one I went with was Yellowface.
See, I didn't like Yellowface that much.
And I know a lot of people don't, but what I found from that book was just being like seeing the behind the scenes from publishing. I thought that was interesting the way she did it. So, I think to each his own on that one. Yeah. So I'd also want to hear what has been the most like thought-provoking book you read in 2023.
Ooh, that's so interesting. I think I'm going to go with a book I don't talk about that much, but I thought was really interesting. It's a book called How Not to Kill Yourself, Clancy Martin, and he talks about suicide a lot in this book. And I found that really interesting because I think it's one of those topics that we'd say is important and we say we should talk about it, but like every time it comes up, it's in light of someone's suicide, like a public figure suicide. And so it becomes like, well, let's not politicize this, or like, let's just give thoughts and prayers. And this book really goes into the psyche of like people who are suicidal and who have killed themselves. And the author, Clancy Martin, he has attempted suicide many times. So he talks about like what that's like. And he talks about sort of the stigma around attempting and failing. And it's also a book about addiction. And it just made me really think about people in my life who have taken their own lives, and also people in my life who have gone through episodes where they wanted to or tried to. And I thought it was just so thought-provoking and reflective and really beautifully done.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's always important just to have those conversations, and for whoever's going through things whether it's mental health or anything deeper. It's just like good to know that there's books and references out there for that. So thank you so much for sending that one in too. I would love to hear what your favorite, and this is, this can go in multiple ways, but your favorite book that won a National Book Award.
Oh my God, I haven't read any of the National Book Award books this year.
Okay.
So I currently am reading for the LA Times Book Prize in Current Interest, which is a nonfiction category, but it doesn't include history. There's a history category. So the book that won in nonfiction was a history book. So I hadn't read it because I had to read about 150 books this year for this other prize. So a lot of my reading this year is in the current interest lane.
Gotcha.
So I read some of the finalists, but not the winners.
Yeah, I haven't gotten into too many of those. I always read like backlists. Like I don't know, I'm always reading some like really far back book. Like even for the most thought-provoking book, I use actually Up From Slavery. So there's a
I've not read that.
in Washington. And I never read it, and I was just reading it in the way that he talked about the love of reading. For like he gave a story about someone that basically was one of the really like literate readers in his space or where he grew up, and he just like they would always just circle around him when he was reading. So I was like, that's just such a crazy time, and just like to have that as the importance of how reading is. So yeah, so I would also want to know, what is your most like disappointing book of 2023?
Ooh, I have so many. Okay, I'll give you two. So the book that I had I'll give you three. There were two books I had really high hopes for that did not deliver. And those were Yellowface and this book called Raw Dog, which was about the history of hot dogs, allegedly, but it wasn't that. It sucked. It just wasn't what it said it was going to be. But the book that I read that I was like, how did this book get published? Like, what is this mess? Was a book called The Lost Sons of Omaha. And it is about, it takes place in 2020 in Omaha, Nebraska. It's during like the 2020 protests after George Floyd. It's like May 29th or June 2nd, like right in the heat of everything. One of the lost sons is this young Black guy. The other of the lost sons is this white guy who owns a bar, who was in the military. And the white guy shoots and kills the Black guy during the protests. And, he says it's self-defense. The Black guy is dead. It becomes this whole political thing. And then eventually, this is not a spoiler. This is all, I mean, it's a true story, but also it's all on the blurb. The white guy ends up killing himself. And the book explores these two people and whatever, but it's totally like both sides bullshit. Like the white guy had been in trouble in the past for being like transphobic, for being homophobic. He had a sign up of like Donald Trump, he had like a cutout of Donald Trump in the bar. And then the author's like, but we can't really say he was racist, even though employees of his were like, he used the N-word. He's like, well, who doesn't use it? It's like one of those books where you're like, why are we still writing this book and telling this story in this way in 2023? And I ended up finishing the book because I hated it so much. I had to see what the author did, like how I had to read the whole book because I was like, I need to understand how this is possible. But that was like my truly most disappointing read. The other books were like books I had high hopes for that did not live up to the high hopes. But this book was like, what the fuck is this? This is garbage.
And it was released in 2023?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Everything I'm doing are books that were released in 2023.
Okay, I didn't know if you wanted to go I was gonna give free range. So if you had read
I'm just doing books for 2023, mostly because I read mostly 2023 because I was reading for this prize.
Yeah, that is a crazy story.
It's so bad. And people who are listening, don't buy the book to see how bad it is. Like, just trust me on this one. Usually I'm like, I didn't like it, but you might. Yeah, I'm like, I didn't like it, but you might. But with this book, I'm like, I didn't like it, and don't support it. Don't take it out from your library either, because that supports the book too, and it's garbage, and it should not be supported. And if you look at reviews, you're going to see he got good reviews, but that's because he got a really nice review from the New York Times, but he also has written for the Metro Desk and for the New York Times for his entire career. So you can't trust the review. Goodness. It's just a mess of a book. Just trust me on this one.
All right, I believe you. I believe you on you sold me on it.
Okay.
All right, this is a different one. So, author with the most impactful social commentary in 2023. So it could be across social media, a news article, anything.
Oh, okay. So not their book.
It can be their book too. But anything that maybe you're like this author was, had a very important moment, and I think that they had, a really important thing to
Hmm.
say in 2023.
Gosh, that's really tricky. Okay, I'm gonna say Hala Alyan. She's a Palestinian American writer and poet, and she has been very outspoken about what's happening in Palestine. And she wrote the book Salt Houses and the book The Arsonist City, both novels, and then also some poetry collections. And she's just been like sort of a leading voice on what's going on and how to support and reminding people to like stay focused on what's happening over there. So I think all things considered, she would probably be my pick.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. What about so this? I think I have two more in 2023, and
Okay.
then I do also want to go into you as a content creator a little bit in
Okay.
your the Stacks pack and all that.
I can talk about whatever you want. So you just
Okay,
ask
cool.
away.
So for 2023, I also want to know who was your breakout author of 2023.
Ooh, okay. This is easy for me. I have two. Can I have two?
Yeah, you can have. Let's go two. Let's go two.
Okay, thank you.
I was say more, but two's great.
I'm gonna do two. Okay, my breakout authors for 2023 are the author of my favorite book of the year, which is called We Were Once a Family. Her name is Roxana Asgharian. The book is about the Hart family murders, which was when those two white women adopted the six Black children and then drove them off a cliff and killed everyone in 2018. And um, she examines the world of child separation and like foster care and adoption and all of that and like all of those systems, but also tells the story of these kids and their birth families and tells their story instead of focusing on like the true criminess of like the ladies that murdered everyone. So that is one. And then my other one is this book called Hijab Butch Blues by Lamia H, which is a pseudonym. So I don't actually know who the author is. But in the book, Lamia takes their story as a queer immigrant from Southeast Asia to the United States. They're Muslim and talks about the Quran in relationship with their own like personal intersections and identities. And it's just really well done, really beautiful and thought-provoking. And then I have one more, but it's sort of a joke, but it's not. Britney Spears. Her book was amazing, and she broke out as a debut author and killed it. So also
yeah,
her.
she broke every record. That was
Yes,
crazy.
she nailed it.
And also the first book you're talking about reminds me of I don't know if you've seen Atlanta with Childish Gambino, but they had an episode
that episode is based on the true story.
Yeah, that's what I figured. All right. This is gonna go into what is your favorite Stacks book club pick of 2023? So the book you picked.
My favorite book club pick is Monsters by Claire Dederer. It's not a perfect book, but there was so much to discuss. It's about how consumers of art deal with the art of monstrous people. So Harvey Weinstein, Richard Wagner, who was a musician, a classical musician and composer whose music became like the theme songs for the Nazis, basically. Like how we engage with Valkyrie, which is like his famous piece. Anyways, and the book is asking these questions about like thoughts and feelings and art and how we respond and who monsters are and all of that. And the book is so rich for thinking and discussing, which I think is what makes a great book club pick. So for me, it was my favorite book club pick because we had some really great discussions. Though I will also say this year we had, I think, the best book club picks, like as a collection of 12 books that we've ever had. So I was really excited about this year in general.
Yeah. So how do you go about diversifying your picks? Because it seems like you have like all these different, you read from different genres. I'd love to hear like how you go about like, all right, I need to read, or when do you switch, or how's your style when it comes to the next book you read?
So you mean for the podcast or for me personally?
The podcast or you personally? I just kind of want to know like how you diversify.
Okay. Yeah. They're sort of connected and sort of different. So the way that the show started was that I wanted to talk about the books that I wanted to talk about in the way that I wanted to talk about them. Mostly because I felt like a lot of shows about books at the time were either like very stuffy, pretentious, or they were like three like white ladies in Nashville, like drinking wine and talking about Colleen Hoover or whatever. And I was like, I don't want that either. So for my reading, I just try to read what's interesting to me. I try to just, and I'm a really naturally curious person. And so it's easy for me to try and find new things. But for the podcast, I understand that I'm programming for an audience. And so I try to make sure that, we don't do back to back the same kinds of books, but also I let my guests help me pick for book club. So the way the process works is once I come up with a guest, once I book a guest, I'll be like, great, we're going to do book club. Can you send me over 3 to 5 books that you would be interested in reading and talking about on the show? And the only stipulation usually is that it can't be a book by someone they're so close with that they would be uncomfortable talking negatively about the book. But otherwise, it can be from any time period. It can be by any author. It can be something they've read and they've loved. It can be something they've read and they've hated. It can be something they've been meaning to read. And sometimes they'll send over 3 to 5 books and I'll be like, oh, I'm not really excited about any of those. And I'll send back 3 to 5 and be like, what about these? Like sometimes it'll happen, they'll send over like 3 books that are all thrillers. And I'll be like, I don't really want to read these thrillers, but here's a thriller by a Black author that I'm sort of curious about. Or they'll send over a range of things and I'm having a hard time figuring it out. And I'll look at what we did the month before. And sometimes when I email, I know for sure that I want to talk about, like if it's like we had Miriam Kaba on the podcast and she is a prison abolitionist. And I knew for sure I wanted to do an prison abolition text. So I asked her for which text she might be interested in. I sent her back. I also sent her a few that I knew, and then I let her pick from that list. So it sort of depends if the person is like an expert and I really want to talk about that topic, or if it's someone who's sort of like sometimes with memoirists, we do memoirs, but sometimes with memoirists, we do novels or short stories. It really just depends on the person and the show as a whole. So it's more of an art than a science.
Yeah, and as you're kind of talking, I'd love to just hear about. Can you share a little bit about the Stacks Pack? Like, when did you start it? How it came about? And a little bit about your bookish content creation, just your overall membership process. I'd love to just hear what
like the Patreon.
Yeah, the Patreon, as well as just because for us we do membership clubs. So I'd love to just hear like what made you go into doing your membership, and how do you think about creating value for your members?
Well, this is a silly answer because the answer is I needed money to make the show.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, before I had a following of large enough listeners to sell advertisements on the podcast, there were people who listened and loved the show. So I started the Patreon, and it's just really grown from there. But it is now, the community is so great, and we have a Discord, and we're always like talking and in contact. And we do monthly book club meetups for the book club pick. We do like Google Meets or whatever. So I get to see a good chunk of them. There's a lot of people in the Stacks Pack, but probably 30 to 40 each month actually show up for the book club. And it's not always the same people, but that has really helped to like build the community. And so, yeah, I started it because I needed to like pay for things. And from the Stacks Pack, I've been able to hire my editor, this wonderful guy named Christian. And then I have an assistant named Lauren. She's not really my assistant. She assists the show. So she like a production assistant. She helps me with emails and show notes and keeping everything organized and, all of that. So, so I was able to hire Lauren as well from that. I wouldn't have been able to do the tour if I didn't have like the money from the Stacks Pack to be able to like hire people to help me put it together. So it's a great community that adds so much to my life. But the truth is, the reason that they exist is because I can't do the show without it. And even still now, even with ads, like the Stacks Pack is really how I'm able to run the show.
Yeah, and I would love to hear how you've been able to take the show and the podcast and then turn it into like a live experience too. Like, how do you think about in real life events versus I guess like on the web or virtual?
Yeah. Well, so I have a background in theater. So live performance is like my true love. And one of the things that was really important for me when we did the tour is that I didn't want it to just feel like a podcast episode. So there were a few things like, for example, we released the audio from the bonus or from the tour as bonus episodes exclusive to the Stacks pack. And one of the things though was that we always cut out one segment from the live audio out of the audio recording, because I wanted it to feel like if you showed up, if you took the time, if you were able to get there, that you got something special that no one else got. There was something we shared special in that room. Also, a lot of the questions and stuff that we talk about on the podcast are fun and interesting, but because my guests for the tour were all people who had been on the podcast, I didn't have to ask them those same questions. I got to ask them other stuff about their writing and their work. And for all of them, it had been at least a year or two since they had been on the show. So it was sort of like catching up, how have things been? Last time we talked, this happened. But also just thinking about like we're creating a space in a room together that no one else is a part of. And so what does that mean? And what does that feel like? And how can I honor people's time and energy? So that's always what I'm thinking about when I'm doing the tour, but also even when I'm doing like book events, when authors come to town and I get to host them at a bookstore, that's a different experience than a podcast. I understand that a podcast is audio. And so when I'm in person, I understand that there's also a visual component for most people. And so I try to think about that and also the energy of being together. It's so singular to listen to a podcast. It's in your ear. Maybe you put it out on a speaker and it's in the room. Maybe there's someone else in your family in the room listening, but for the most part, a podcast is something you do alone. And that's very different than being in a room full of people.
Yeah, and it's cool, like with the podcast experience, you tend to grow to know people without ever meeting them. Like just listening to your podcast, like it almost feels like a friendship that comes with listening to the podcast, right?
Yeah.
And then as far as like those in-person events, you just get those unique moments that, like you're saying, that you create specifically for people that have really been fans of the Stacks.
It's more about community. It's less about me in a lot of ways. It's more about like there's a person next to me who's sitting at the table next to me, or like I'm in, like these are all people who in some way are like-minded. They like, we agree at least about this one thing, that we wanted to be in this room for whatever reason.
Yeah, and I think bookish content creators like yourself and reviewers, just like you create such a unique environment with the stories that you bring to life, even through just reading the book. Like the way you review a story just really connects to a large audience. And so like if you're ever in Denver, or if you ever want to do one in Denver, we will for sure help wherever
I'd
you
love
need.
to. Tell someone to invite me to Denver. I'll be there.
Exactly. So yeah, let's go into these. Let's go into the last one of 2023. I know I was saving that last. So who is your favorite author of 2023?
Ooh, I didn't read that many authors, multiple books by any one author this year. Yeah. So that's sort of hard for me. I mean, I read a Toni Morrison book. She's my favorite author of every year, I guess. Yeah. I mean, I don't know that I have a favorite author of the year, I have to say. That's sort of a letdown of an answer.
Yeah. Well, you're not going to like my answer because I was going to say the author of Yellowface.
Really?
RF. I know. And the reason why, the way I don't know, the experience with the book was unique. I don't necessarily, I get why people wouldn't like it, but the way that she was bringing in that world of publishing and weaving it into this like kind of off the kilter individual was unique. Like I feel like, I think it's, when you watch a movie and it's just like a crash and burn waiting to happen. Like you're like, I can't believe this person did it off every single time. That's why I was like, I think the way she wrote that was really unique.
I guess my answer should be the author of the year is Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah, because he was on every list. He was in every, like, I feel like if you're talking about like author of the year, like he would be my pick, not just for me, not just for like the book, but I just feel like he was everywhere. He was on, the Times list, the New York Times list, the Atlantic list. He was a National Book Award finalist. He's up for the Aspen Award. Like, I just feel like his book was like the darling of the year, and he was the darling of the year as well.
Yeah, that's fair. Let's go into 2024 for your most likely to break out in 2024 author.
Okay, wait, hold on. Let me pull up my 2024 spreadsheet. Give me 1 second. Okay. Ooh, most likely. Okay. My book that I've read so far, the debut that I think people are gonna just lose their shit over, Wait, should this be a debut author or could this be an already established author?
Let's say debut for this one because I have one that's coming up
Okay.
next that you may have
Okay.
a
Because
different.
I have an established author who I think is going to have a breakout year. But for my debut, I'm going to go with Kaveh Akbar's book, Martyr. I read it. I loved it. It's going to be on lists. It's just one of those books. I just know people are going to love it. If it's not on like published like media outlet list like the New York Times, whatever, it's going to be on every bookstagrammer's list. It's so good. It makes you feel things. It talks about art and culture and grief and family, and it's really well written, and he's like a very nice guy, and I think people are going to just fall in love with him. And I think Martyr slash Kaveh Akbar is my pick for breakout debut book person of the year. He's written poetry collections. It's his debut novel.
I'm gonna look out. I'm gonna look out for it. That sounds exciting. All right. So, who is most likely to have a renaissance in 2024? And the reason just give a little backup. I call this the Chance the Rapper Award, and the reason why I say that is because his last album wasn't as, to me personally, wasn't as good as like the Coloring Book and 10 Days, Acid Raps. But I do think his next album that's coming out is going to be a renaissance, and everybody's going to be like, Chance is back to who he is. That's what I'm thinking about when I make this.
I hope this for us because I love Chance the Rapper. He brings me so much joy. I've seen him in concert twice. I adore him, and he needs a renaissance. But for in the literary world, I think there is only one answer, and the answer is Percival Everett. Percival Everett is the author of Erasure, which is our book club pick this month at the Stacks, but also is the book that the movie American Fiction was based off of. So he's already having a renaissance because people are going back and reading Erasure, which came out in 2001. But also, Percival Everett wrote his first novel in 1983. He has written, I believe, 28 or 29 since then. And this year, he has a book coming out called James, which is the story of Huck Finn, but told from the perspective of Jim. Ooh. So I think he's going to have a renaissance this year because people are already sort of like checking out his stuff because of American Fiction. He wrote that book, The Trees, that came out a few years ago. He got a lot of recognition for it. I have not read James yet, but everyone who's read it has said it is brilliant. So I'm really hoping this is his National Book Award year. This is his Pulitzer year. I am rooting for him. I think he is probably our greatest living Black novelist. I think I might be forgetting someone, but for me, for my money, he is. And also, and this is sort of like not to do this to a woman, but one of my favorite authors is a woman named Danzy Senna. She wrote the book Caucasia. She wrote the book New People. She also happens to be Percival Everett's wife. And her book that's coming up this year called Colored Television, I just finished a few days ago. It is so fucking good. So my real hope is that they're up for the National Book Award or something against each other. And then they both rise to even more fame together with the power of their literary strength. And then that Percival Everett writes a romance novel a la Mr. and Mrs. Smith, because he does like satire, like a satirical romance novel about a couple, husband and wife authors, who like end up having to like fight each other and like be on Vogue covers and like the whole thing. So that is my fantasy for 2024 for Percival Everett, for Danzy Senna, and for myself.
You just gave a lot right there. that everything, and it can happen though too. Like those,
it can happen.
Yeah, that's what I say. It's not like
her book is so good. I don't know that it will.
Yeah,
I don't. So her book is like sort of funny and like kind of light, and usually literary awards don't really honor that. But it's so well executed and like so well written and so smart that I'm hoping that she's gonna kind of get that like wild card spot.
Yeah. All right. So this is a little bit of a shameless plug, but I want to hear what book from the Mega Challenge. I'm not taking a Mega Challenge question of yours.
Okay.
Book that you haven't read but have owned for the last 5 years that you will read in 2024.
Oh my God, there's so many. Okay, I'm considering doing Little Women by Louisa May Alcott because I love that movie and I've never read the book. There's this book behind me called Lost Girls. And the author of that also wrote that book, Hidden Valley Road, that I'm currently reading right now. So I might go back and read that. It's sort of true crime. The thing that's sort of depressing about that question for me is that I started the podcast in 2018. And while I did read a lot of books by people of color and whatever, I was really reading a lot of white authors at that time in my life because I really like nonfiction. And if you don't really go out of your way to find it, nonfiction by people of color really isn't marketed very well, especially by like Black authors. And so a lot of the books that I've owned for a long time are books by white authors, and they don't all interest me that much anymore. So
Yeah.
some of them do still, like a lot of them do still, but like I don't prioritize them in the same way. So we'll see. There's a few books that I have, but I am leaning towards Little Women because I've always wanted to read it. So we'll see.
Yeah. So for this one, I went Children's of Blood and Bone. I haven't read
Oh,
it yet, and I've heard nothing but good things. It was actually one of the last books like Kobe Bryant talked about.
oh wow.
Enjoying. I do want to see. I do need to check that one out.
I have that book and I've had it for more than 5 years, so it would fit for
Yep,
me as
yep. I think
well.
it came out in 2018. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I bought it in 2018. That's right.
Perfect. So now we'll talk. This is another question, more stacks based, but who would you like to have on the podcast in 2024? This could be a guest, I mean, a dream guest, or
Okay.
maybe more.
Well, if you've been following the show, if you know me, I wrote out a list of dream guests when the show first started. And I've been lucky enough to have a lot of those people on. But there are 3 people on the dream guest list who have still not come on the podcast. They are still have an open invitation. Those people are Barack and Michelle Obama and Oprah Winfrey. So those are my dream guests. That being said, I have a new dream guest for this year because allegedly Serena Williams has a book coming out this year, her memoir. So that would be a dream for me. As far as like non like mega celebrity people, I'm looking to see. Oh, Tommy Orange, who's the author of There, who's also from Oakland, like me. He's got a book coming out in February called Wandering Stars. So he is definitely on my dream list for this year because his book came out in 2018 when I first started the show and nobody wanted to talk to me. So he's a person. And then previously mentioned Danzy Senna would also be a person that I would love to have on the show.
That's good. Yeah, you gotta put it out there. You never know.
Yeah,
You never know
I'm a
listening,
firm
you know?
believer. You got to put it out. You got to put it out.
So who's an author you hope drops a book? It hasn't been announced yet, but you're saying I would love to potentially hear this author have a new book out.
Okay, the book is coming.
Oh, okay.
I just don't know when. It could be this year. It could be 2025. PSA Layman is working on another book.
Oh,
so whenever that comes, that one. He did the live tour with me and we talked about it briefly, and he really wants it to come out soon. And so we'll see. Maybe they'll push it faster and it'll come out by the end of this year, but I think it'll be 2025.
All right, we have three questions left, so it's gonna just let you know. What would you like to see more in the book world in 2024?
I would like to see more books that are not quote unquote serious be acknowledged for their skill. As I mentioned, Danzy Senna's book, Colored Television. I just think a lot of like awards and lists acknowledge like serious quote, like kind of like the Oscars. You know, it's like they never give the Oscar to a funny comedy. They always give the Oscar to like a serious movie. And I'd like to see more acknowledgement of like satire and like quirky, funny, weird stuff, because I think that takes a lot of hard work and we don't acknowledge that if the payoff isn't like devastating.
No, I think that's a great answer. What would you like to see less of in 2024 in the book world?
Less bad books. Less editors not editing. Less books that are 400 pages that could have been an essay.
Great books. I agree with you. And last but not least,
okay,
the most anticipated book of 2024.
Okay, well, I have to be honest. My book that I was most anticipating was Colored Television by Danzy Senna. It comes out July 30th. I literally couldn't wait. I read it in 2 days this week. I just was like, I have to read it. I have to know. Akwaeke Emezi, the author of Pet, You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty, Dear Centurion. They have a book coming out in June called Little Rot that I'm really curious about. I think it's like genre fiction, so I'm excited about that. Genre literary. What else am I most anticipating? You know, I have this spreadsheet that I'm like scrolling through right now, and it has like 70 books for 2024 that I'm excited about. And that it only goes into August. So I think Brittany Griner has a book coming out this year that I'm very curious about. I'm anticipating that just because I'm curious about it, but I'm also cautiously, you know, going in knowing what celebrity memoirs can and can't be. Matteo Escarapore has a book coming out in July called The Great Hemisphere, and I love his stuff. Who else? Carla Cornejo Villavicencio has a new novel coming out called Catalina. Her previous book, The Undocumented Americans, we did on the book club, and she's great. There's so many. I'm like literally scrolling through this list, and I don't know. Salman Rushdie has a new book coming out called Nice. There's too many. There's too many. And then James, of course, I'm highly, highly anticipating.
Yeah, that even when you're talking that one that stuck out was the Brittany Griner one too, because I know her story has to be crazy.
I know. I'm curious to see how much she can tell. I'm curious to see if she has a ghostwriter. I hope so. It'll be really interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Traci. This has been
thank you.
The Creators Talk podcast. And just thank you. Let us know where we can find you, as well as anything exciting happening in 2024 for you.
Yeah. So nothing exciting for me. I'm not on tour this year. No, we're going to be doing the show every Wednesday. I release a new episode of The Stacks. You can type The Stacks into any of your favorite podcast players. We're on Apple, Spotify, Overcast, Undercast. I don't fucking know. But we're everywhere. You got your podcast. You can find me on Instagram at The Stacks Pod. I'm on Threads at The Stacks Pod. I'm on all the places. You can find me, follow, and of course you can join the Stacks Pack if you want to support the work that I do as an independent podcaster. It's patreon.com/the stacks. I don't know. That's where you can find me. thestackspodcast.com. If you find me in any one place, there's links to all the other places to find me. If you find the podcast, if you subscribe to the podcast, in the show notes, there's links to everything I do. And if you just listen to the show, that would be really nice.
That's what I was going to say. I will leave all your links in the show notes as well as on YouTube. But thank you so much.
Oh, wait. I thought of a book I'm really excited about. Hold on. Anticipated.
Let's do it.
One more. Michael Arsenault has a new book coming out called I Finally Bought Some Jordans. And he wrote 2 previous comedic essay collections. One is called Why I Can't Date Jesus. And the other one is called, I can picture the cover. It's green. Oh my God, it's killing me. It has money on it. Called I Don't Want to Die Poor. And this is his next book. It's like another essay collection, comedic memoir about, he's a queer Black guy. He writes these funny essays about like growing up, getting wealth eventually, or like not wealth, but like coming into middle classness, like as a writer and cultural observations. And he's just so funny and smart. And I just love his stuff. So his book is coming and I'm very, very excited about it.
Yeah, since you brought that up, we actually interviewed him for
yay!
Yeah, so it's actually Small World. So that's actually really cool too.
Yeah, I love him.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Traci. It's been a pleasure. Take care.
Thank you, Kyle. Take care.